Okay. Hello, everyone out there in Apatic land. A little late evening webcast for you here. This evening, I am joined by one of my colleagues who is kind of a jack of all trades, I'd like to call you, Jim. And he's going to be talking about a very important topic that I think apps is a small part of the picture here when it comes to using devices in your schools, but certainly a very important one as you move forward. So I figured it would make a great episode, and that is the concept of deployment. So without further ado, I have Jim Lavere here. He is going to be sharing with you his wisdom and experiences in using and deploying devices um, across your organization, and hopefully you can pull away a couple of ideas and go from there. So without further ado, Jim, please tell us a little more about your background and your experiences in kind of using the information that you're sharing with us.
Very good. Well, thanks, Mike, for having me. As you know, I'm Jim Lavere. I've worked in education since the late 1990s. My educational experience spans the K-20 continuum. So I worked in K-12, higher ed. I've worked in CTE. I've actually lived in different parts of the United States. So I've been around. I've been at ADE since 2003. And I've been really interested in, energized by the whole mobile learning area, specifically from a pedagogical and a technical perspective. So today, what I really want to do is kind of highlight some 30,000 feet views of MDM, demystifying what it is, some considerations, and hopefully folks can walk away with something that they can really apply. So I won't really get into the minutiae of things, but I really want to make sure that folks understand conceptually, some considerations as well as some little tips and tricks. So yeah, all right,
Excellent. Yeah, let's get right into it.
all right. So here we go. I am going to screen share, and we'll get this rolling. And can everyone see everything?
We are good to go, Jim. Thank
Uh,
you.
you got it. As I mentioned, I just presented this presentation actually with a colleague of mine at the MORIC um, at our recent NICE convention. Had a blast. So what I'm going to do is I'm not really going to go and read each slide by slide, but I really want these there as a visual reinforcement for all of you. So without further ado, demystifying deployment, MDM, DEP, so realistically, we're just going to hit the four components of deployment: ownership models, MDM, DEP, and resources. So, all right. So in a nutshell, you have devices, right? Whatever they are, you have to authenticate at some level. When you think about iOS, we think about Apple ID. When you think about Google or Android, you think about different Gmail addresses and such. When you get to that point where your devices have really grown to a specific level, you have to think MDM. What does that mean? What can you do with it? You have to think about realistically what your goals are. What are you going to do with this device or devices? What are your goals? What I've seen across the K-20 continuum is a lot of institutions will procure devices, and they're like, we've heard a lot about device X, whatever that is, and they procure multiple units. Well, they get them, and now what? There's a lot of disconnect between management, utilization, and the pedagogical components. So when you get to that point, you really need an MDM at some level, okay? And you can use it at a granular and a completely, totally meta level use in management and deployment of content and applications. So again, I'm going to really kind of hit this at a high level, and then I'm going to kind of land the plane a little bit. So here we go. So devices come in all shapes and sizes, and you can see, basically, what I have here. You've got a lot of, OS 10, you've got iOS, you've got Windows 8, you've got Android. Realistically, think about your institution. What makes sense? What do you currently have, and how are you using it? When you think about the SAMR model, I was just sitting in a presentation with fellow colleague ADE Rich Colosi, and he was talking about the SAMR model. And really, what are you really trying to do with these devices? Is it the same the same activities that you're using your traditional desktops or conventional computers, as I call it. What are you really trying to achieve, and how are you managing it? So that's where the MDM piece comes in. Are you looking for one tool to manage all of them? I think, jokingly, I think about Lord of the Rings, one ring to rule them all. Um, Not necessarily. I've had a lot of people ask me, they're like, Jim, what are your thoughts on Chrome devices with MDMs? And my immediate question is, why do you even want to go to that level with an MDM? The Google management, the dashboard within Google is fantastic, and it does a lot of things for you. It simplifies the management, deployment, and maintenance of those devices. So why complicate yourselves with just thinking about tying in all your devices into one MDM? You may need to look at a situation where you have multiple MDMs to do specific things. Okay, I hope it didn't confuse anybody, but there are just different considerations depending on your environment, your infrastructure, and really what your needs are. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about iOS. Okay, you think about Apple IDs. What they are? What are they really? They're basically your keychain to not only your email, but how you procure content for yourself, in addition to your institution. When we think about the different features, you think about Find My iPhone. You've got the iBooks content that can be consumed across multiple devices, and of course the latest edition of iCloud Drive. All of these are wonderful tools, but it really hinges upon that Apple ID. And if you notice in the top right, you've got that Apple ID for students. You've got that U13 issue. There are a lot of institutions that don't want to go there. And I can understand their concern, but at the same time, you also don't want to limit yourself. So, and I said this earlier, thinking about what tools you're currently utilizing, how they're going to be used in a pedagogical management and at a technical standpoint, you really have to tie them together, and you really have to kind of iron out those things before these devices hit your floor. You don't necessarily, want to limit yourself by any means, but realistically, in order to make this successful, you've really got to have buy-in from all parties. With your MDM, you typically think of profiles. A lot of you Active Directory users out there think about OUs, particularly in the IT management realm. When I think about MDMs, when I sit down with different districts or other educational institutions, I ask them, again, what are you trying to achieve? Who are your stakeholders, and how do you foresee them within a broad schema? Okay, and then you build your scaffolds, and then tie it back to your user groups. Okay, so you have to start there conceptually, and then you utilize the tools. If you see in the back, you've got Configurator. Great tool. It's free. If you're not familiar with it, there's a lot of resources out there. You can definitely reach out to me as well. Really think about how you are going to utilize devices and where do you start. Configurator is a great place. Notice I have on either end, you've got Configurator, then you have Profile Manager on the right, and then the screen before you. If you think about profiles, you can actually set your restrictions in your OUs there, and then synchronize it with Active Directory and how you bind your devices within iOS and OS X. Specifically with iOS, you really want to kind of leverage your MDM to kind of push out those profiles and to kind of take those users. So when they authenticate in, they're binding into those areas in which you want them to be, whether they be faculty, students, or staff, administration, IT, whatever that is. It's a little tricky, but once you get everything kind of synchronized, specifically with the certificates between all three, you're golden. All right, I left the three tools up because there's another piece to this as well. When we're talking about specifically like with Profile Manager, you're thinking about pushing information or content to those users, right? Whether it be, iBooks, whether it be applications, whether it be, specific media that you want to push out through your MDM, you can leverage your OS X server. They have a lovely feature called a caching server. Okay, what that does for you is this. When you download applications as the Volume Purchasing Manager, okay, when you're installing that, everything that gets pulled down from Apple, from their servers, gets stored in your caching server. And what that does is this. Think about it. You have multiple users that are going to be calling for the same application, right? You only have so much bandwidth, you only have so many access points. What does that mean? You've got massive bottlenecks. I don't care if you've got AC standards, etc. You're going to have a large amount of information being pushed through the bandwidth that you have available to you. So how does this form an advantage for you? Well, the caching server, what it does for you is it pulls down that application and it keeps it on your local network. Therefore, when multiple users jump on your network, let's say, for example, you have 100 faculty that are trying to pull down the latest update to iPhoto for iOS. When they go to call to Apple for the application, Apple servers will default to the local caching server. Therefore, your bandwidth isn't being chewed up, and the users are being served in a much more effective fashion. So I'm just going to throw an example out there. Say you have a 10-minute download, okay, per user. What that's going to do is it's going to cut it down to a fraction of that time because the application resides locally within your subnet on your caching server. Okay, so it's a win-win. Deployment models, a lot of folks are familiar with this. If you think about institution one-to-ones, you'll see the different icons that I've created below, and I've come up with some graphics to kind of support that. So I'm going to let the pictures speak for themselves. So when you think about it, you're just simply leveraging the management model where the institution is going to be managing these devices. They utilize the tools you see before you, and you push it out to your users. Okay, so the student-owned, same kind of thing. It's a little bit inverted, but that's where you leverage your MDM to kind of push out your profiles, your certificates, and your restrictions. One thing you want to use is a radius server. Okay, if you don't have a radius server, I would highly recommend you look into that. What that can do is you can basically restrict your users, specifically your bring your own technology, your device users. When they come in, they can authenticate into your wireless, talk to your MDM. It pulls down a profile and installs it, and that way it allows you to leverage your MDM to kind of control what they can and can't see. All right, this is where I see a lot of folks are still. I mean, I myself, I'm actually a tech director in currently 2 institutions, and realistically, this model is still being utilized. When you think about iOS devices, when we're trying to push them out to users, you may not have enough to go around, so you have to go to the shared model. Realistically, the same model applies. You're still pushing everything through those tool sets, buying, purchasing, App Store, configurator, MDM. However, it's going to a shared device instead of an individual. So it is a little different. All right, so institutional ownership. One thing I want to highlight with the change with VPP is that they've removed basically the facilitator. So realistically, they're streamlining it. So the program manager procures the applications through VPP. You apply it to your institution, and then you can leverage it through your MDM. So your MDM essentially, instead of buying spreadsheets of licenses, really what you're doing is you're procuring virtual licenses that are through a token. The token then handshakes with your MDM, and then you can push it out to your users as they authenticate. Mobile device management. There are a ton of companies out there, and I know a lot of folks that are listening in, they may or may not be utilizing one or more of these products, okay? And I will highlight Meraki in the upper left. That is a free version. However, you have to pay to play at certain levels, so you may not have support, but it's a widely adopted tool. AirWatch, of course, has quite a large market share within MDM. But again, I mean, there are a lot of different companies out there. I mentioned earlier, you may want to look at multiple MDM solutions to fit your needs. And when I look down, I see Jamf software. The Casper Suite is fantastic. I mean, it's specific to the Apple platform. And again, if you're in a mixed environment, I mean, that may or may not really fit your needs depending on what you're trying to do. But again, it goes back to your goals. I'll throw out one that I'm actually really excited about is the FileWave product. I've actually sat through several of their technical demos and had lengthy discussions with them. And I think they've got a great product, and it services a wide variety of solutions out there. I know AirWatch does as well. I don't want to, pick on anyone specific, but I just want to throw that out there. If it's something that you're looking for, there are different resources out there and reference guides that you can view, and it'll tell you exactly what platforms these tool sets will manage for you. So there's a wealth of them out there. Definitely, contact these guys if you haven't done so already. I know here in New York, the districts utilize their local regional information centers, or their RICs, and they kind of figure out what's supported, and they kind of partner with them. But again, I mean, really look what's out there. Network, there's a lot of PLNs out there that can give you a lot of feedback and a lot of user information, specifically with usability cases. So reach out there. The information's there. Don't be overwhelmed. You're not alone. So a lot of good stuff out there. So realistically, just a couple things with mobile device management. I mean, you just want to develop your profiles for your users. You set your restrictions for your students. You enroll these devices, and you connect to the profiles. And you can do that at different stages depending on the tool set, your infrastructure, and really what you're trying to do. You can do like silent installs, where you walk through like a series of stages, like when you open up your iPad, for example, and you go through, you can actually tie it into your MDM depending on that profile. There's a lot of layers, but again, I mean, if you look at what's here, this is what MDMs do for you. Okay. I mentioned earlier the certificate between your volume purchasing and your MDM. Literally, it's an S token, a certificate file, and once you procure your virtual licenses in volume purchasing, you can literally tie that and port that over to your MDM through a secure URL. Once that handshake occurs, you can then take those devices and then push out these licenses over the air, and you can recall them at will if you need. All right, last but not least, DEP. This is relatively new. I think it's a great program. When we really think about, when you open up that device for the first time, and, you smell that new Mac smell. I absolutely love it. When you go through that, the initial stages, DEP is part of that now. Okay, so as of last April, when you buy devices, okay, that device is literally owned by the entity that procured it. So, for example, if you work, I know Mike works at New Hartford Central School. So, if Mike is buying, let's say, 100 iPads, when he actually procures those devices, those serial numbers literally are bound to that institution through DEP. So you may be saying, okay, Jim, that's cool. So it's part of the inventory, it's tied to the institution. Now what? You can utilize DEP in conjunction with your MDM, in conjunction with Configurator, to really hit those profiles and really kind of preset the machines essentially based on those profiles once you go through those login screens. So it's actually a really nice way to manage your devices in a really seamless fashion. And again, it's all Apple native and it's free. All right. So when you think about DEP in a nutshell, DEP does what Configurator does, but in the cloud. Okay. You walks you through your initial stages, just like you would with an iOS device. You go through, you swipe, you check your country, you enter your Apple ID, etc. You tie it into your institution's DEP, and then once the DEP device is enrolled, you set your administrators. You tie it to your MDM. You assign those devices either in a shared or individually assigned model, and then you review the assignments and you compare it to the profiles, and you're good to go. It's literally that simple. All right. I mentioned earlier this replaces the processes of Configurator. When you take a cart, for example, say you have a cart of 30 iOS devices, you take all of them and make sure they're all synchronized. The power's plugged in. You plug it into either your MacBook Pro or your iMac, and then you start managing it through Configurator. So what happens at that point is you go through those initial stages through supervision. You go through all those setup stages, and the bottom line is DEP is trying to streamline that setup for you. So literally, you open the box, you go through the steps. You have to have some background stuff already set up specifically with DEP, There are resources online to get your institution set up with DEP, and I have those at the end. There's a little QR code, and it'll link you to a Google Doc that I have, and it has a lot of content in there. So there's a lot of information out there. I mentioned that earlier. Definitely ask your system engineers in your region. I know we have 3 here that are just fantastic. Um, but definitely reach out. Again, you're not an isolated island, specifically in your district that's not, let's say, Apple friendly. I know the district, one of the districts that I'm assigned to as their tech director, I am actually enforcing a mixed environment. So I just did a massive purge of older XP machines. I brought in a series of Chromebook devices. I've pushed in Apple Labs in both OS 10 and iOS. And I'm also supporting Windows, as well as some other smaller systems. But the whole point is, think about your goals. Where are you going to take those devices? Where are they going to be utilized? Does it make sense to tie them to an MDM? Think about all those concepts, okay? In short, what does DEP do for you? It really streamlines that setup for you, and it would behoove you, if you haven't already set up your DEP account, definitely do that. Talk to your program manager, because what it will really do for in a management standpoint is it'll streamline them, it'll help them out, and in the end, it's going to help you, because they're going to be able to leverage those tools in the cloud, give you the content that you need, and then you can move forward with your kids. So MDMs, there's a lot out there. Really think about what's going to make sense for you. Ideally, there's a lot of tools, again, that do different things. There's pluses and minuses to all of them. But you really need to sit down and look at your goals and connect those dots and identify with what your goals are and figure out what tool set is best for you. All right? So if you're in a shared environment or if you're in an assigned environment, depending on that scale, if you've got 50, if you've got 150, that tool set that you choose for DEP and MDM, how you're going to work those together is critical. Okay, so as I mentioned, there's a resource at the end. Use your mobile devices, capture that QR code, use those resources. Again, reach out. There's a lot of good folks out there. We like to share. I'm a sharer. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it.
Fantastic, Jim. I'll give you a second to get back down to it. There you are. So yeah, I think what I loved about this talk, Jim, is I think very succinctly you kind of put all the details out there as far as what is needed. And I know you had the QR code up there for people to gather your resources. Of course, we will set up a page on our webcast page for you and add all of your contact information there. Links to any of the resources you've mentioned, and then we can people can access those as well. So some people are catching this on YouTube, others may be catching it on the embed on the Apotek site, wherever it might be. The point is you have a lot of really, really fantastic ideas, and like I said, you've been doing this in a wide variety of environments, whether it's your current K-12 school, previously higher ed, and so on. And well before there was DEP and some of these other things. So I think if people want to look at it, I think what's nice about the ideas you put forth here is if I'm looking at whether I'm looking at a classroom set or whether I'm looking at a whole school or an entire district or larger, these concepts are going to come into play sooner than later. You're going to move past that cart. And using configurator as a kind of a gateway to deployment, and then certainly you have to move into VPP and MDM and all these other crazy acronyms that we have as you start to bring more devices into the mix. So I'm glad I had you on as a guest. Any other closing thoughts, Jim, as far as before we wrap it up?
No, it's great to be here. I've been a fan of Apotek, as you can tell. A little representation tonight. Little shameless plug there, right? No, I mean, a lot of folks are really scared. A lot of people that I talk to are like, oh, I don't really know this Apple stuff, or, I don't know where to start. And exactly what you just said, Mike, is key. Start with configurator. That's the gateway. Start with 5 devices. Play with them. Don't be scared. It's just firmware on a piece of hardware. That's all it is, guys. Really think about it. And I know there's a lot of guys that I've talked to that know a heck of a lot more than I do, and I'm like, wow, I'm just humbled by them. And I reach out to them. I'm like, and they're like, Jim, that's totally cool. Reach out. I'm just totally not ashamed. I'm like, I know I have a lot of experience in those areas, but I just what my hope is folks see that tonight, and hopefully they avoid a couple pitfalls. I mean, I've worked with K-12 institutions, higher ed institutions. I've been contacted, and they're like, Jim, this is what we have, and I'm thinking, whoa, 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 time. What are you trying to achieve? And they can't answer me, and I'm like, okay, you really need to kind of wind this down and to really think about it. At this point, what's going to benefit you? What's going to make your program, your pilot successful? And that's my concern. Platform agnostic. I mean, I don't care if it's a Chromebook. I don't care if it's a, Windows 8 tablet. I mean, what are you trying to achieve? Okay, connect those dots. Obviously, I'm an Apple guy, but I mean, I really think about that, and I mean that's really what I've walked away from being in not only a support role, but being a technology leader, an innovator, an integrator. Really trying to reimagine what's coming next. And with the changes, just like you said too, Mike, with the changes, the acronyms, all these new tools, okay, you build this schema, something changes at a corporate level, how does that impact? It's a domino effect, but at the same time, it's not the end of the world. So, there's a lot of resources, there's a lot of PLNs. I belong to a lot of them, as you know. But at the same time, there's resources out there. Don't panic, guys. It's all good.
Excellent. All right. Thanks so much, Jim. Appreciate it very much. So we'll have all your contact details, so when people are in that total panic, they can reach out to you, and you can put them back on the right track, or at least point them in the right direction and move ahead. So thanks again, Jim, for being on, and everyone out there in Apatic. We will tune in next month for another exciting presenter on some excellent topic, hopefully that will help you move forward with using apps and iOS devices and maybe even more in your own school. So thank you very much, and we will be back next month. Take care for now.
Bye-bye.